Hey everybody, Sebastian back with Lost Hombres, and today we're on episode 30. We made it. We're now big kids now, so welcome. And today we're going to be talking about some topics related to mental health and spirituality. So it'll be a fun day of exploring kind of two topics that I have a lot of knowledge on and a lot of experience with. So it'll be interesting to kind of watch how we progress through this and maybe talk about some of the things that are changing about psychology and that are opening up doors for people with new experiences within understanding the self. And over the last couple months, I've been doing a lot of deep diving into mental health, probably since like last November or so. I really went into a deep dive into the DSM-5, which is the current book that we use in mental health. And so I took a deep dive into the DSM-5, learned a lot about what the like idea behind diagnosing really comes down to, and kind of understanding how the tier system works. So over the years, there's obviously been different renditions of the DSM-5 or the DSM, and right now we're on rendition 5 TR, which is like a revised edition, you could say. So instead of a brand new one, it's just the same one, but changes that they found would be important to add. Maybe they missed something, or they felt it would be easier to define something if they added another category. So the idea behind this book is that you take a cluster of symptoms, and these cluster of symptoms over these durations of times and these levels of severity would then be calculated or formulated into some sort of diagnosis that then could be replicated in other people, which is the validity needed to be able to say this person is suffering from this ailment or this issue. And so the DSM-5 is the way that we as clinicians will view someone's symptoms and then help them understand what these symptoms are likely telling us about what is going on with this person. And so this is like the medical model, right? You come in with symptoms, and the symptoms tell you something, and then you give a label, right? And so, how do I relate this to spirituality? Well, this is similar to like when someone comes in with the certain types of ailments, they'll tell them like it's this certain type of demon or this certain type of sickness or whatever it may be, like with Chinese medicine. If you're struggling with overeating or struggling with like maintaining weight, there's going to be certain things that are, your demons, like your inner like dialogue. The inner self is uncomfortable with something. There's something that is happening internally that's affecting your behaviors on the external side. So there's like different ways of viewing like different medicines and belief systems that can work with the idea that there's a spirit or there is some kind of deeper like philosophical point or like presence within you, a conscious presence within you, and that conscious presence is a big factor in one's self development, right? So that's the more traditional Chinese medicine or alternative medicine, as it's called, compared to like the scientific method, where again, we take these labels and then we've had scientists decide that this is what we're going to call this. And so we call it this based on stats and statistics, which again is similar to a spiritual belief system where, based on so many encounters, they have finally figured out this is what's going on. So how do we know that something like greed affects people? Because over time, if these people keep experiencing these same negative outcomes, and the rationale behind it is like, for example, greed, then we'll see, well, every time people are greedy, these are the effects that they have. Every time people experience sloth, these are the things that happen. Every time people have pride, like, you could say pride matches very well with narcissism, right? So it's that like, you can't tell me otherwise. I know, right? So that narcissistic or that personality disorder, you could say, is okay. What is a personality? Okay, it's a conscious state. So there's a problem within your conscious state. So there's a type of disease happening within your conscious state, which again is like you are okay. So let's say that the problem is that you have insecurities or so you have an inner voice telling you bad things. Where does this inner voice come from? Like, how does that exist? Like, that's where science doesn't explain things. It doesn't tell you like where the voice comes from necessarily. Like, it doesn't explain how the mechanism of a voice works. They'll tell you it comes from trauma. Okay, so you can give me an origin, but you can't explain to me the functionality of how does this voice talk to me without it being there. So that part isn't answered. So sure, they're telling you like this symptom comes from this, so it can give you an origin, but they can't explain the functionality of why that thing affects you the way it does and how you can be hearing a voice that isn't there but is there. And so this is how like science and spirituality can sometimes differ, because science won't tell you those answers. They'll just tell you again like, well, the voice comes from that, so then the rest of it doesn't matter. But then what does that do too is that tells people, okay, so then all I am is symptoms and I'm not something more profound. And so on a spiritual belief system, they're saying these inner demons that are messing with you are bringing down your spirit, are bringing down your energy. And by remembering that you are greater than these things that are holding you down, it frees you, it breaks the chains that are holding you down into a negative state and helps you align with the higher self, which is what we do in therapy when we say, hey, we want you to self actualize into the highest form of self. And so this same idea of being the highest form of self also applies in psychology, like where we tell people, hey, we want you to imagine yourself in a future where you feel like that's where you want to be. Like, this is like my future outcome. This is what I believe and I want from my future. And so this future that you're imagining or creating, right, is the same thing as like a higher purpose. So like you can a higher purpose is seeing yourself greater than the person you are currently. And so a self-actualization or an image of a self-actualization is the same thing as living out your divine purpose. It's a purpose greater than yourself. So these same principles again apply, even like though, we may not look at them in a similar fashion, but they truly are on some degree like the same. Like for example, when we say positive self-talk, right? So there is times where what is positive? It means a good in nature, right? It means like, hey, it's healthy, right? And so there are times where we need that positive, we need that higher energy, we need that lift up, right? So we're saying lift us up higher, right? Bring me to a higher. But there are times where I also have to what? Cut people off who are holding me down, who are not allowing me to ascend, who are bringing me down. And so I have to cut them off. And this is the same thing as assertive communication or boundary setting or limit setting, right? We're saying no more, I'm going to cut it, right? And so that's the same process of then again purging, right? What is to cut out or to limit is to purge out, right? So these same ideas and principles exist in both standards of care, right? Whether you can say like, hey, don't let negative thoughts in your life, hey, don't let the bad vibrations into your life, right? Don't let the negative people that want to hurt you or drain you, don't allow people to push your boundaries. These are all the same. What is a boundary? Where do I see this? And this is the same thing that we get from having an aura. We call it the personal bubble. Well, your heart produces literally a bubble. And so we'll use things in therapy like, hey, personal space. But how does one define personal space without having some degree of like, frou-frou, right? Like, okay, this is my personal space. But how do you define that? Because there's nothing there. But yet we must accept that something is there. There is something to that, because as a collective we agree that personal space is important, but we can't define how far that is. We can't define what that looks like. But on a spiritual sense, we can define that, because if we say, okay, your heart produces a magnet around you, and that magnet affects the field that you operate in, then we could say there is a personal bubble, because your heart literally is producing a magnetic field where you feel the things around you, which is why you have higher senses or empathy. An empath is someone that can feel people shift in energy, right? The more sensitive They're more sensitive to other people's actions. They're more sensitive to other people's inactions. So you can see that sensitivity could also be empathy, but on a different scale, right? Maybe uncontrolled empathy. So you can see that these different belief systems, even though they're considered different fields, are much more the same that they're not. Again, when we talk about where did the idea of religion didn't come from a guy sitting there and being like, this is how it is. It came from a study of understanding people. So as people would come, these people come back and say, hey, this is what we figured out. Hey, this seems to work. Hey, this seems to be a problem. Hey, this is something we keep seeing. So through the study of humanity and the study of how energy operates within the world, how humans operate within this world and this simulation, whatever you want to call it, this universe. So then once they understand the operation of this universe, then they can apply that insight into each other. And that's where you get religion. Religion was originally the study of like the universe, the study of reality, and really understanding like the greater self and the greater cosmos and how they're all aligned, right? The study of science, again, goes back to just studying facts, like studying numbers, studying statistics, studying like outcomes. And so the difference is that science is trying to prove itself versus religion where it's trying to understand itself, right? So on a religious scale, like things want to be like, why is this happening? What's the origin? What's this, right? Science is more like, hey, look, this is a theory that we have, but we want to prove it. See, if you do that, this is what happens. See, if you do that, this is what happens. So they're trying to prove a reality versus religion where it was trying to understand the reality that was in. It was trying to make meaning of all the different things it was seeing and all the different things that were being shown in the universe. So when you come from a spiritual belief system, when it comes to mental health, you're going to get a more full picture of like the whole person versus if you come from a very DSM-5 institutional like statistics side. And again, it's good for measuring numbers and stuff like, hey, we know this will do this and this will do this. But again, this takes away the idea that when we look from a more open perspective and we want to understand, like, hey, what is the origin and why does this happen and what are the known things and how do we, like, looking at it from a larger perspective of trying different things until things work. It's, well, from what it is, it's more, hey, this is the hypothesis and we're going to prove that this is how it happens, right? And so they're coming from a more biased perspective in the sense that it limits creativity because of outcomes instead of letting things play out. Sometimes real change may not be apparent immediately, but it does take time. But meaningful change, even if it does take a little longer, will last throughout the lifetime. But some of these more meaningful therapies may not get to show up, or some of these meaningful ways may not get to present themselves because of the limiting, constricting nature related to things like the scientific method and things like that. So again, there are commonalities on both ranges. There are belief systems that are very similar in nature because again, once you start studying humans, you realize what that we're very similar. We have certain behaviors and things, and we align between cultures. There are stories you'll hear from other cultures. You'll say, "Hey, I can relate to that." I can understand that. And for all of us who think our culture is better, just look around at some of the horrific people within your own culture, and you'll soon realize that we all have heroes and antagonists amongst us. And so, for us to believe that we are superior, we forget that the vessel, the person that we are, is not what makes us who we are. It's the light inside that allows us to be the person that we are. So you're not so much focused on the vessel, you're focused on developing experiences with the people that are relevant in your life. And so that's what matters more. If you're not designed, if you're not meant to operate and connect with people outside of your realm, that's not your destiny. That's not what you were designed for. That's not what you're meant for. So it's kind of like follow what your role is and enjoy that process and let the life kind of take you where you're going. But okay, so let's go back to the different types of therapies and different types of concepts that are coming up. And one of the things I'll teach you guys about this process with the DSM-5 is the way it kind of operates is whatever's mainly affecting you, the biggest things that are affecting you, those tend to be like the primary diagnosis, okay? And then everything beyond that is like a secondary at that point. So like whatever the main thing that's affecting you, That's like the main thing that gets focused on. And then everything else, again, is a subsection of whatever that main thing is. So, whatever is affecting someone the most, that's going to be the focus of whatever the therapeutic process is, or even the focus of how their diagnosis works. So, their diagnosis is going to primarily be whatever the main issue is, and then subcategories beyond that. And sometimes they may only, for example, have depression with some anxiety, but it's not enough to justify generalized anxiety disorder. But we know that depression also can contribute to anxious thoughts due to the lack of self discipline, self care. So when these people are lacking self development, they're going to need that extra boost to be able to get back on track. So it's going to affect the little, I'm not good enough. And so that there will be anxieties that come from someone who lacks confidence and self-care. So someone that's not able to go do their things is going to be feeling even maybe an imposter syndrome too, right? So that's another thing to think about. But yes, again, so when we're looking at DSM or therapy versus like a spiritual belief system, there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of commonalities. And now we're even getting to certain therapy styles that you could even say are really starting to shine in the sense of the more spiritual belief system, the deeper belief system. For example, there's this therapy style called internal family systems. And what this really comes down to is a similar idea of what I've done in the past, where I believe that there's an adult and there's a child brain, and both of these brains are very important to the way we operate. And in this type of therapy, they also do talk about the adult and they talk about the inner child. And so there was already, boom, like a connection there where I'm like, yep, I understand this. And this has been around since the 80s. And so he talks a lot about in this book, No Bad Parts. Dr. Schwartz, like I can't remember his his first name, but um, he writes this book, No Bad Parts, and kind of explains his philosophy with his modality and where it came from and kind of his ideas. And we have similar belief systems in the sense that I do also believe that we are a different self. Like we have an adult, we have a little kid self, and then we have the present. I like to say that I'm not an old man, I'm not a young man, I'm just a man, right? So I'm a combination of the group, and that's what makes me the man that I am. So this combination, this being allows us to be the self. And in some therapy styles, it's like they take away that. Like if you're supposed to be one person, and it's like there's no multiplicity, and that's just not true, right? And so once you can figure that out and see that consistently, then you start to understand how these systems work. So in his belief system, there's these ones called exiles. You have like protectors, you have firefighters, like there's different, you have managers. So like there's different ones. And so the adults, they play certain roles, like, like the ones that are always being on you about doing things and being the best, kind of like harassing you. And then you have the little kids who like, you shun away or you shame or that bring you down or come out and when, during times where you don't want them to come out and they kind of ruin your life, and so you exile them and make them a part of your problem. And so you start being split into different selves, and the different selves is what causes some of the chaos that people are experiencing because they're not able to be a whole person. So they're fractured in different selves. And so there's a ability to work with the selves, like, taking the time to sit with the different hurt selves, taking the time to sit and ask questions and explore further of like, where's the origin of this and why is this memory still being held on to and what can we do about this? And so they're really about, working through the different shattered pieces of oneself and then being able to feel like unification at the end of this process. So they kind of put it all together. And so that's where IFS comes in and shines, is that it's able to unify the different parts within the self and to create a whole self again, right? And so over time, there's like pain and there's like memories and these things, and it's essentially like you get to break the curse, like you get to break this black magic that's been holding your soul back. You get to break through this negative energy that's been bringing you down. And so once you break this negative energy, once you pass through this phase, whatever it is, this process, then you can really feel aligned with yourself and more calm, more present, more empowered, and less reactive to the world and less frustrated with the world. So One of the things that I think it's a little different, and this comes to the spiritual beliefs, and they also are very spiritual too when it comes to their type of philosophy. So they really do align with a lot of like the spiritual belief systems of the conscious, the greater self, like that, there's a divine spark within all of us. So there is a lot of positive that comes from IFS in the realm of like self-awareness, mindfulness, consciousness, all that stuff, the soul, all that, there's a higher god, a good god or whatever, all those good things. Like this has been a system that's been implemented and is doing well within that realm too. My change or my idea is that there's this. So I like to say you could call it like your soul shard, or like you're like you're a soul, and there's pieces of like your scattered self throughout your life. And there was moments in life where you wish somebody was there to protect you or save you, right? To keep you, and in a safe environment, or to take away this pain that you're about to experience. And those moments where you lacked a hero, you left a piece of yourself there. You left a little piece of your spark there, right? A little piece of your spark got left behind in this process. And so as you advance in life, you feel you feel some fracture within you, right? And so there's some fracturing going on, and that makes you struggle with this relationship that you're having, right? With yourself, because there's pieces of you that aren't being picked up because you needed a hero. And now that you're an adult, that person never healed. They've been waiting for you to go back. And so what you realize in self-development is that you are the person, and even like in shadow work and stuff, as you work on yourself, you will go back and pick up those pieces and reunite them with the self, right? And so you feel like a more whole self. So the more you develop the self, the more you feel stronger in who you are and more convicted in your change. When you go back in time, you'll be able to confront these different issues and actually take them on well. All right. And you'll be able to like work through some of these challenges, and then as you work through some of this history, the inner child, I like to say, the inner child will take you back, and it will address new problems, new things that you've been avoiding, things that you haven't been like taking care of. And this is going to come out and play out as what? As change, as being positive. So this process is important because you want to be able to be accountable for the change that you're making, and you want to be able to like sustain change and follow through. So IFS is really good, and being able to just understand that, hey, change comes from within the divine and push forward. And then even with my type of therapy, right, as you change and you find yourself and you fulfill yourself, you become a full person. Now this full person can then use their spiritual magic, their spirit, their divinity, their anima, whatever you want to call it, mana, and this energy that comes and flows through them, they can use it into the future as well. So this is where clairvoyance comes in. So now that I'm a full self, I'm less fractured, I'm less vulnerable to being broken by the future, right? So this is where I believe that, as you take care of the inner child and rebuild that strength within this child and rebuild the soul, that soul now has the strength to take on any future that comes, because now you've protected the self, you've like reunited the self, and now that confidence is now back, and you're a full self again, and this full self can handle anything that comes its way because it's not broken or shattered by its past, right? It's a more fulfilled self now. And so this is where you get that divine spark or that divine holy fire right back in your life, because there's nothing in your past holding you back. So now you can fully engage in the future, right? There's no weight behind you. So anything that comes your way, you'll have the agility, stamina, and determination to handle it, right? So this is what happens when we are able to understand that the past and the future do play a role within what we are. But then again, the shattered self and the selves are different from the adult and the child, at least from my perspective. In IFS, they see it as kind of more of a unified system, where there's like a 17-year-old. So what they're saying, from what I see, is the past, they're kind of combining parts, right? So they're analyzing this fracture. Like, okay, so there's a memory there's a 7-year-old and he's stuck. And so what they're doing is they're saying, okay, we're going to relive this memory, except you are going to change and fight. And so the same idea that I'm having, that there's shattered selves, the shattered pieces in there, except they're kind of saying they live within you, which is true, right? I'm saying they're from your past. So right now they're pieces of you, but like they say, they're floating around. So in a lot of ways it's very similar, but I think that there is a very defined adult and child within us, and then there's pieces of our history and our future that are kind of more abstract. Kind of like how I've said before, there's multiple past and multiple future outcomes because there's a lot of could have beens and there's a lot of should be's, and so these two are infinitely changing as you continue. Your past can continue to change futures. So really, like, this is how we can start breaking down mental health and spiritual health, because really they're the same concept, right? Whether you want to say call it depression or call it like a demon, like you could give it a name, right? And you could just say that depression is the name of a demon. And what does this demon do? It holds people down. It drains them. It hurts their soul. It brings down their energy. And we want to give them the tools to fight off this inner demon, right? Because we can't take it out of them. They have to fight from within and push it away, right? Or break free of this demon's energy. So you could just say that depression is like a name of a demon, and these steps are what's going to help you like be able to overcome this demonic energy, or this dark archon, whatever you want to call it, right? Same thing for anxiety, right? Anxiety is the fear of the future, and this is how, like I said, you have clairvoyance and you can read the future, and then you can adjust the present accordingly to make sure that the outcomes are going to be in your favor. Right now, can you always verify that? No. All you can do is do the best you can to get the favorable outcome that you seek, and just again, work with the process, right? And so that's another thing. It's like you prepare the best you can so that you can feel confident in all situations. And at least when you go there in peace and say, hey, I did the best I could. And you truly go in there believing that, and people feel that authenticity from you, and they're more likely to work with you, because at the end of the day, you have authenticity, which is not something that people can find by. They have to live it. They have to develop it. They have to sustain it. They have to be in it. And so it's very important for this person to understand that this is part of growth. This is part of being the self, is that one has to be aware of their potential, and one has to know, hey, this is what I'm capable of, and to put in that effort to get those outcomes, and then trust the process. So that's where IFS and my modality can kind of combine. And also, like I said, I've added more things to my modality, or like at least the way I perceive it from a more spiritual level, when it comes to like mindfulness, when it comes to utilizing our energy, how spirit works versus how like your physical health works. Your physical health is your blood, while your spiritual energy is a whole other thing. It's more of like your nervous system and your energy. So you're not just electricity, you're not just blood, you're a combination of these two things. And so, yeah, like your spirit is definitely going to be that static electricity that you're using to operate the system, but your physical is your blood, right? So if you run out of physical points, you die for reals, like permanently. But if you run out of spiritual points, you die on an emotional, like a spiritual level, where you won't want to get up, you won't want to go do things. So both of these deaths are fatal to the spirit, to the ability to move, because the vessel requires both the mind and body to work as a team. So if you have a lot of stress, which we could call, not again like a demon, an uneasy presence, the name of something that corrupts your mind, something that causes you to believe that bad will happen in your life, something that possesses you to not be able to stop thinking about negative things, And what do you need to break that? Well, you need something that's going to help you, like remind yourself that that's not real, that that's a passing moment, that the only thing that's real is what I am and who I am, focusing on my breathing and my heart, right? Focusing on my presence, being in the moment and being able to regulate and be present. So, I mean, at the end of the day, that's if you can be present and go back to being in reality, that goes back to what? Just the spiritual belief system that you want to be in nirvana, you want to be in balance, you want to be mindful. It's all the same thing. It's when you are able to combine the superego and the subconscious, right? Or the super conscious and the subconscious, and the superego and the id, whatever you want to call it. When you're able to remove ego, and you can just combine the top and the bottom selves, This is when you find true unity, and you can call it heaven, you can call it the Trinity, whatever, like mindfulness and meditation and just existence. So there's a lot of things that you could consider this, but it's the same concept, right? So when you're finally in a flow state, when you're finally just coasting and existing, it's because you finally have found your alignment where you don't overthink and underthink, and you don't overfeel and underfeel, but you just feel and think enough for every moment. Because anxiety is overthinking and depression is overfeeling, right? When you're overly in your feelings, you don't really have a lot of thoughts. It's hard to do anything. And when you're overly in your thoughts, it's hard to not sit down and do anything. So then you're in extremities, and these extremities just cause a lot of disease and a lot of unhealthy consequences. But whether we're talking about physical health problems, we're talking about spiritual, like, you can have people that have so much anxiety that they start having like failures in their organs. And so, like, you could have people with anxiety to the point where they start having seizures, they start having epilepsy and all kinds of stuff because of the struggles they have with containing their anxiety. So this is why I'm really glad that therapy has been moving towards like more like a spiritual realm or like a more deeper understanding. Because in the past it was really about just like fixing symptoms, but then we just looked at people like symptoms instead of human beings. And so like it's like, oh, they have to like reduce this by 50 and we have to do this and they have to do this by 30. People don't want to be told like you're doing this 30% less. It doesn't hit the same as like, wow, like it sounds like you had a great adventure that day. Like something about like them living a story that they can be excited about improving upon is a lot more motivating and healthy for their development than being told like 7 out of 10 times you did it more. There's just something about the way that's explained that people tend to shut off thinking like, I don't want to be seen as a number. I want to be seen as a person. And so there's definitely a rejection towards that labeling system, the number system, versus embracing a humanistic system, which again, a lot of people I've worked with come in and wonder, like, whoa, like you talk to me like a human being. I really enjoy this. And they come back and they're like, wow, I'm actually listening and I'm using the tools and I'm getting something out of this. Instead of feeling the pressure of like, oh, I have to do this, they go out and they think about the things we talked about. They consider the ways that we explored the information and they apply it in meaningful ways that are lifelong and changing versus just looking at everything like a number, right? And knowing that change is less about, it's like losing weight is less about the scale and more about the process of how you feel while you're losing the weight, because the scale isn't what's going to motivate you. It's the way you're living your life that's going to motivate you. you know like having less panic attacks is great, but what's going to make you focus less about the panic attacks is enjoying your life more, right? So if you like find more fulfillment in your life, you probably won't have as many panic attacks because you're at a baseline more fulfilled than when you're not fulfilled. So that's, yeah, that's what we're seeing mental health move towards: less labels, less like foreverly broken, and more fulfilling, and more aligned with a moral compass, and really digging deep into the self and the psyche, and allowing like even things like I've been more open to things like hypnosis now that I understand how meditation works, now that I understand how daydreaming works and I understand how dream states work. Now, once you understand some of these other like more like scientifically unscientific subjects or ways of exploring things, like once you understand the fundamentals here, it changes the way that you see the world and you operate within it, because then now you can say, oh, there's something here that's different, or there's like there's a way to like view the world that I didn't see before, and now that I can see that the world does operate differently, now it can change the way I operate within it, because I get new outcomes as a result. So as you work on, understanding the mental health, right? Like when I'm overwhelmed, I need to cool off, or when I'm underwhelmed, I need to warm up. Like when I understand basic foundational stuff, I can really change the way I operate instead of living in like a victim mentality or a lack of understanding. I just can be more accepting of things that I understand, and realize that by accepting myself and by being myself and by aligning with myself more, that I actually become a more fulfilled person and a more understanding person than if I'm always judging, critiquing, and holding myself back from fully being who I need to be, due to the fear of, prosecution from others or judgment of others. And like I tell people, at the end of the day, like, who is anybody to judge you at the end of the day? If something in you, if your divine spark is telling you this is who you are, embrace it, enjoy it, then who are they to know that that's what my divine spark is telling me? And if they're judging me, then they're obviously not aligned with their own divine spark, because someone that's aligned with their divine spark is worried less about judging other people and more finding fulfillment within their life and the life of the people they love. And so there's a change in energy when you realize judgmental people are people that are already having struggles with personal alignment. Because people that are personally aligned have less judgment towards others and more understanding towards others. And so when we fix ourselves, change ourselves, our lives become more fulfilling because we ourselves view the world in a new perspective. And this new perspective is giving us the ability to, make healthier outcomes and, make deeper connections, and also just allow ourselves to also sustain our limits and know, hey, this is where my balance is. This is what I need for my life. And following through with that and accepting that, hey, sometimes there's limitations that I want to accept and I need to work with, and that's okay. This is where I'm at. This is where I want to be, and I don't want to, I don't want to pressure myself any more than I need to. When I'm ready, I'll make the next jump and step. And sometimes we just need to take a break to realign ourselves. And then once we get that motivation and spark, we fire off again, almost like a neuron. And the way our brain operates, where the axons are firing because they fill up and go, but it takes them a moment to fill up and go. Even though for us it's happening super quick, right? But in their realm, it's happening as quickly as it needs to. So just because things are happening fast for us doesn't mean within the realm of whatever's normal for that, is it happening fast for them. Just like as the planets are moving. For us, it's slow, but for them, they could be moving fast because in their realm, their relativity, that's how fast. To them, it's just it's the way they operate, right? It's the way they view the world, or they're operating within that system. So our time relativity is designed for the way we are built in this world, the way we operate. That's how our time is relative to us and nobody else. So the way we are designed to operate tells us everything that we know about the way we're supposed to be operating within this realm. So let's go back again to different operating systems that kind of align as well with spiritual belief systems. We have another great little tool here. It's called dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. And DBT also is very useful of like Eastern traditional medicine type of philosophies, like mindfulness and decatastrophizing and being present and remembering that we're one with the universe and breathing and just, being like a higher version of a self. So the same philosophies coming from DBT, another one that came out later in life. It wasn't so much from, one of the beginning therapies, but kind of evolved over time. Same thing for my therapy. It kind of evolved over time and sort of find its footing as it kept being created. But when we're looking at DBT as an example, again, this belief system believes in mindfulness. It believes in applying yourself and trying to find peace in your life, accepting the challenges that you have, learning to let the thoughts go, let the feelings go, and just exist in self, and just understand the self and become more peaceful with the self. And so, even like another example, DBT being one where they use a spiritual belief system, a soul belief system, one that aligns with just being more present and understanding that there's peace in our hearts when we allow it to be there, and to be more focused on being present versus worrying about the future or worrying about the past. And like I tell people, why they call it future trip? And I say, because when you're looking too far ahead in the future, you fall in the hole that was right in front of you. You were so focused on that, you didn't see what was just right below you. And so this is where future tripping for me comes into play, because I want to teach people, hey, if you keep focusing on that future over there, then you're going to miss opportunities, or you're going to miss struggles, and things are going to happen right in front of you. So we want to make sure that we're living more present so that we operate on a higher level. Again, clairvoyance is great, but when you stay there, you're no longer living in reality. And when you lose your grip on reality, you're going to be more stressed out and nervous, because it's like you're living in a new world. You come back and you're like, what did I miss? Well, you missed a few things, and you're not going to be able to relive those memories because you were living somewhere else. You were living in an alternative universe that's not the present. So you're going to skip out on the memories that matter versus the imagined ones that aren't going to even come true, depending on what ends up happening with the way you're operating, right? So that's another example of a mental health system that's been more open to spiritual belief systems. It's kind of funny because there's also one called ACT, and I was reading a book called The Happiness Trap, and it was talking about how it talks a lot about evolution, and I realized like, man, evolution, like the way they talk about it sometimes bothers my brain just because it's like our ancestors were really dumb, and I'm like, oh, okay, like I mean like, they're kind of like smart for what they were, right? And it's kind of weird to hear that because I'm like, human beings are just they were just functioning within the realm that they knew how to, like, so they weren't dumb. There wasn't They weren't trying. It's like they did yeah, like they're not dumb, but anyways, beyond that, it had a lot of things about like mindfulness, accepting things, believing in something greater than yourself, like believing that like we're all connected and like human beings, like we're meant to suffer, and suffering leads to enlightenment. And it's like all these things, and you're like, oh, okay, so like spiritual belief systems, just like not, but okay. And so even like things like act therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, they also have like mindfulness and these belief systems and things like that. So it's interesting to see that regardless of the new models, they all go back to the same principles, that there's like different selves, and the different selves affect different parts of us. And when we accept these different selves, then we become more aligned with the true self, because the true self can only come out when we fully align with the selves. So we are a mix of several things in one thing. It's like a snake has its head and its tail, right? And if you just looked at the head and the tail, they're not the same, but they're both necessary for the snake to operate with the body, right? So the head is one part, the body's another part, and the tail looks completely different from those three parts look different, but they're all necessary to be a snake, right? So together they create the snake, but on separate, they are parts of the snake, but the parts is what makes the snake the snake. So we're all made up of parts. So when we understand that parts make up a whole, just like we have two arms, two legs, the torso, the head, the different parts is what's making up the whole. Then we can even see it on a like metaphysical level, a spiritual level, whatever you want to call it, a subconscious level, a conscious, like these levels. There's levels within even the inner world. So even the inner world that is not even visible to the naked eye, but only visible to the third eye, essentially, the deeper eye, then you can see, oh wow, there is differences in these behaviors and these actions. Even though again, they're not things that you can tangibly see, but you can see the effects of them, right? Just like you can see the effects of somebody that's overthinking. Like based on their behaviors that they're overthinking, but even though what is thinking, it's something that's coming from within, but it is affecting the outside. Same thing with feelings. Feelings are completely within them, but they're affecting the outer world. So even though it's something that's coming from the inside, it is affecting the outer world. We see it. And even the heart, right? When your someone's resting, we can see that too. So these are things that cannot be seen, but can, because of the way people are operating. So they are only visible because of the way they affect people's behaviors. So due to the behavior the person's presenting with, I can see what's affecting them on the inside. That's how we know there's different layers. Because depending on what layer is being affected is going to depend on how they operate. And like I tell people this, if you're up here in the higher layer of like thinking, you're not looking for fun. It's very hard to be in any kind of enjoyment or easygoing or a bubbly moment when you're up here in thinking mode. And until the things that are holding this person in stress mode are dissipated, they're going to remain in thinking mode. And it's going to be hard to operate and interact with people when they're up here in thinking mode. So the different selves even can be represented in relationships. When two people are in feeling mode, they're going to have a great time. When two people are in thinking mode, they're going to be able to respect each other and talk really well. When two people are just in that being mode, they're just hanging out being, they're going to have a great time because, again, They're just operating within the same realm, but they're not having expectations of each other, which is allowing them to coexist, right? Coexist in an environment where there's no expectation, but just pure love and enjoyment of the other person, right? So there's different layers of even the way we hang out with people. And we only can confirm this because of behavior. If you took away human beings, we couldn't understand those three levels of consciousness. They wouldn't exist in the same way anymore. So the only reason we can see animals and us have different degrees of consciousness is because we have the ability to see the effects of consciousness to the body. So we have, in order to even know the conscious states affect things is because of the bodies that they are representing the conscious states as they come out and they're represented. So there's another example of how like the spiritual world can have a profound effect on the physical world, even though it's not something that we can tangibly see in the same sense, but all have been affected by in some way. So I mean, and even this like there's human beings out there that even though they don't believe in a higher power, when certain moments come up, they'll start praying like, hey, if there is something out there in the universe, please help me, because we're like programmed to some extent to do that, just as much as we're programmed to dance and sing when no one's around. There's a lot of people that do that. They have a need to dance and sing and be rhythmic. Or even when you put on music, why do people naturally just start moving? What is it about music? Why did these things happen? What is it about music or singing or operating or expression that naturally come out of people without them even looking to do that? Something about them will start moving or tapping before they even know. So again, these are things that are programmed into people. Now, psychology wouldn't talk about these things because it's not relevant to making people healthier, but this is what I'm talking about when it comes to understanding humans. If we go more to a sociology kind of idea, and we look at societies and we look at cultures and we look at trends, by viewing all this information, you will start to see things, you will start to see truths, right? This is when you really start to expand, like, hey, what's really going on here? So you look at a social, structure, you'll start seeing things and numbers, and that's where you start reading data. Hey, based on this is what I'm seeing. Hey, based on this. And so then you can make a hypothesis that, hey, based on what I'm seeing, this is going to happen. If this happens, this is going to lead to this. And so you're not interfering so much with the world, but you're trying to understand how the world plays out. And when predictions don't play out, then you say, okay, let's review what happened. What happened with society? What happened with the structure that maybe changed or influenced this? And again, that's when you start understanding the human psyche, right? But when you say this is going to cause this or this does this, you are reducing humans down to, again, a very specific subsection of symptoms that you focus on versus the whole human, and seeing how these two worlds can collide, how by observing the greater masses, you will be able to then come to conclusions that you can then test out. And that's how data can be collected, right? Versus trying to pick a symptom or pick a problem and then try to hypothesize the solution for that particular problem. It's better to look at the whole system and see what problems are emerging in this system, and then view hypothesis, okay, this is going to happen. And once you start realizing what happens, then you take this information and then you say, hey, what do you guys think about what we're seeing here? What are your belief systems? And then that's how you start creating, you know, healthier outcomes, because they're with both of the macro and the micro in the same category, just as much as the different selves affect the whole. So we want to look at what is affecting the whole and how do the different parts of the whole affect the whole thing. Again, that connection between the larger and the smaller. So unless we get to a role where we're doing that, it's going to still be a challenge within the scientific community, because again, you're taking out a very core component of people, which is, again, like, what is a personality disorder, for example? Like, so what is a personality? Like, define that. Where does a personality come from? So if if they have a personality disorder, then what does a personality normally look like? And so that would be like where did they come from? Like, how do we define what a normal personality is? And and like what's the origin of the personality? Why do people have personalities? And these are questions that science isn't going to ask or isn't going to like go into, because that's more of a spiritual thing. But again, they will talk about things like a personality disorder without identifying what is a personality. Like, what is this thing and where does it come from? Okay, so even if you say it's a collection of schemas, a collection of selves from the past, okay, fine. But again, how do we collect that? Where does it go? How is it formed? And they don't know. They don't know these things. They can't define. They can hypothesize again, like, oh, maybe it's this, but we don't ultimately know. And so this can be confusing for people because then you're not giving them the full story. And this is going to affect the way they operate within this realm, because if you're not able to fix them, then they just see themselves as broken. But if you're able to say, hey, you have something greater, that you're always a greater than self potential, and you have a divine spark in you. And when you know how the human body operates, you can start finding what's going to drive you to change. Then they stop thinking about the systems and they start thinking about the higher self, right? Reaching self actualization versus just, I'm just a bunch of symptoms, and if I can't get rid of these symptoms, I'm a forever broken person. No, you're a forever changing person. You're a forever potential person, right? So we want to change the idea of like I'm a forever broken person to I'm a forever changing, forever potential person with healthy outcomes, positive outlooks. So when I'm working out, right, my body is going to give out way before my consciousness is that light, and that light inside is going to tell me what, no, do another push-up. You can do it, even though my body's like, no, my spirit makes the what body push one more time, and that's pushing my limits, which is helping me grow, right? So my spirit is helping the physical become greater than the self it is right now. Same thing for learning. If I'm studying and I get to a point where I want to know more, and my brain's like, I can't, I'm never going to learn this, I'm never going to understand this information. Well, then right there and then I'm already limiting myself to, right, whatever my brain is telling me I can. But if my spirit says no, you're going to come back and you're going to understand tomorrow. You're going to come back and you're going to keep pushing. That belief system that there's a soul in me that believes that I'm greater than the thing I am right now helps people keep pushing forward, believing that if they follow that little light inside, if they follow that divine spark, that consciousness, if they allow their personality to be at its highest degree, their self actualization will eventually be completed. So if we can get them to believe that they have a divine energy that's greater than the body and the mind, then they'll keep putting their passion towards things that are helping them reach enlightenment, right? Versus if they just think they're symptoms and these symptoms are incurable and they're just in remission, and when they come back, they're just gonna have to deal with them again. It's a lot less hopeful. It's like, yeah, it's tangible, sure, like it is good that you're gonna have tools that are gonna help you, like when you have these specific things come up. But the problem is, again, if either their challenges change, or if you just make them believe that the symptoms are uncurable, then they give up on why try if I'm never gonna get past this. Versus if you say, hey, look, that's divine spark in you will keep continuing to grow and evolve, and it will continue to find its confidence and its power. And through these adversities and challenges, it will start to feel that it is living up to its highest potential. It's again, it's like a forever expanding, version of yourself that can keep growing and finding enlightenment through different challenges, versus one that feels that there's going to be a challenge one day that's going to break them and they're going to have to go back and get help, right? And so I would rather have someone that comes in after I help them and says, hey, I'm looking for help because I know it's in my best interest and I want support, but I'm not giving up hope, versus someone that comes back and says, I'm hopeless, I'm never going to get better, I'm always going to be in therapy. And again, it's that negative energy, that negative light, that low light, that dim light within them that's holding them there, instead of having that great potential that, hey, if I keep working on this every day, if I keep allowing myself to work my challenges and be patient and understand my outcomes, then you will eventually find the greater self, the greater divine self. So it's an important process. It's an important way of developing and growing for people, especially understanding that when you really understand that you come from the spark, that everybody comes. And again, this is where science again. Okay, so, like, let's say we come from evolution. Sure. So, what you're saying is that wherever life started on the planet, we all come from that thing, right? The original source. So, all life comes from the same source, is what we're hearing, right? All life comes from one spark, one divine spark, one whatever you want to call it, a pulse, and it started life. Okay, so there's still immaculate conception. Something had to what? Decide that all those elements combined would make life. Like, that's how it works. Something decided that there would this material within this universe would exist enough to what? To make that possibility even happen. And so again, it goes back to what we can talk about science, and it is important to understand, hey, like, data is important, right? Facts are important, but how we collect data and how we present them are also important. So again, studying society, especially when we're talking about human beings, studying society, seeing trends, and then making sense of these trends is a lot more effective as far as like figuring out how people operate than having the people that come in the hospital and find symptoms and then try to find methods to fix these symptoms, because these symptoms are coming from a greater social pressure. And if we can figure that out, we can actually make meaningful change for people, because we can say, hey, based on what we see in society, based on things people experience, this is what's going on, which is a lot of why I like the ACE, the adverse child experiences, is important. Like, when we look at childhood trauma and how it affects people, we know this. And again, if we're multifaceted selves, your child brain can be very injured because of things that happen as a kid, while your adult brain is overcompensating because it wants to keep the inner child safe. And so if you understand these mechanisms, that you're no longer a broken person, the same sense as like, I'll never be fixed. More like, hey, you have a part of you that needs some work, but the greater self always has the potential to be there, right? That to be the presence, right? Just as much as just because a part of your house is like needs like repairing doesn't mean the whole house is falling apart. And so sometimes, like, you need your bathroom fixed, like, it happens. Or maybe the person that put the plumbing in the first time kind of messed up. That doesn't mean the whole house is broken. It just means that bathroom needs some work. The same thing as, hey, like, if I have the inner child that's a little broken or has some issues, it just needs the adult to give it that space and time to work with it so that it can build that confidence or that consistency within self. So that's the same process, right? At the end of the day, like, we want to find alignment. We want to realize our different selves and our different parts and give them the potential that they need and have to allow us to become the greater self. So I can't become the greatest version of myself until I realize I'm a bunch of parts that need to work together to create the greater self. Just like a house needs a foundation, a roof, and a base. Just like a snake needs a head, a body, and a tail. It's the same thing. So to make a whole, you need parts, and you need to recognize that you're a bunch of divine parts that must work together to create the elements of everything. As above, so below, as within, so without. So both parts create the whole, right? Above and below create the center. It's all the same. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It's all the same, right? So understand thoughts, feelings, behaviors, right? CBT, right? So we have thoughts, feelings, behaviors. Thoughts are what I produce, feelings is what I bring in, and behaviors is what I do with these two, right? How I operate within what I create and what I receive. And this is how I operate. So that's behavior, right? You are weighed. Even the Egyptian said you're weighed by your heart because that's your behavior. Jesus said you're weighed by your heart because your heart is what helps you make choices. Your heart is what gives you the spark to pump you up, to move you. Your brain is always racing and your feelings are always what? Needing. And so you are a combination of these three elements, and that's the basis of people's existence. So remember that you are parts, and fix the parts that need it and support the parts that want to keep going, and find your alignment, find your truth. And if you can understand this divine presence, if you can understand how the psychology world and the religious or spiritual world. I like to say spiritual more, but religion to me is the science of God. It's the same thing. If we can appreciate these different ideas, if we can appreciate these different realms and realize how much closer they are than separated, then there'd be a lot more understanding within the mental health world and the spiritual world. But until we can understand that these two are one and the same in a lot of ways, then people will continue having struggles with accepting either one. So hopefully this has been informative, guys. I appreciate you guys' time and patience, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy. Later.